My parents called my trucking plan a broke man's fantasy when I asked for $75,000 to buy my first two vehicles, then drained $840,000 into my sister's imported furniture showroom, designer office, plus failed expansion. Now they're demanding I sell my warehouse to save her. I said, "Get out." The first truck I ever owned had 212,000 miles on it when I signed the title at a lot off Route 9. The salesman, a man named Pete, who smelled like coffee and diesel in equal measure, told me it would last another 50,000 miles if I treated it right. I treated it right. It lasted 118,000 more, which was long enough to pay off the note and put a down payment on a second one. My parents never saw that truck. They never came to the lot, never asked to ride in it, never watched me back it into my first loading dock at 4 a.m. on a Wednesday in January when the temperature was 9 degrees and my hands shook inside my gloves. I bought a road atlas at the gas station across from the lot that week, a Rand McNally spiral bound with a coffee stain on the cover from the counter, and I highlighted my first route in yellow marker, a 340-mile loop from the warehouse district to a paper mill in Colton and back. That atlas has been in the glove box of every truck I have driven since. 6 years before that morning on Route 9, I sat at my parents' dining table and asked for $75,000. There were 5 people in the room. My father, Vernon, 63 now but 57 then, retired insurance agent, a man who had spent 30 years calculating risk for other people and could not calculate it for his own daughters. My mother, Della, 61 now, retired bank teller, who managed 2 rental units and knew exactly what a dollar was worth and where everyone went. My sister, Lisette, 36 now, 30 then, who sat across from me with her hands folded and her eyes on the tablecloth. My Uncle Stuart, Vernon's brother, 59 now, who had driven up from the coast because Vernon said it was a family dinner. And me, Ramona, 27 years old, no CDL, no contracts, no clients, and a business plan I had written in a spiral notebook over 3 weeks of nights after my shift at a distribution center. I told them I wanted to buy 2 used trucks, hire 1 driver, and start a freight hauling company servicing the industrial corridor between our city and the coast. I had identified routes, priced fuel, mapped loading docks, and calculated the startup cost down to the last dollar. Vernon listened with his arms crossed. When I finished, he spoke for about 45 seconds, and it was enough. A trucking company. My daughter wants to drive trucks for a living. You don't have a CDL. You don't have clients. You don't have a single contract on paper. You have a fantasy that belongs to a broke man at a bar, not to a 27-year-old woman sitting at my table asking for $75,000. Your sister has a business plan, suppliers in Milan, and a showroom lease in a real neighborhood. That is a business. What you have is a map and a dream. I am not funding a broke man's fantasy. Then Della, without pausing, as if she had already rehearsed the second half of the same speech, your sister presents herself, Ramona. She walks into a room and people take her seriously. You showed up today in work boots with grease on your hands and you want us to write you a check. I love you, but I am not going to pretend that is the same thing. Lisette's showroom will make this family proud. A truck does not make anyone proud. Lisette said nothing. She looked at the tablecloth and I watched her fingers press into the fabric, and I thought, even then, that she did not look like someone who wanted a showroom. She looked like someone who had been told she was getting one. I left the table without finishing my coffee. The cup was still half full, and the steam had stopped rising from it by the time I pushed my chair back. Nobody said anything. Nobody followed me to the door. Lisette was still looking at the tablecloth. Della was examining a spot on the wall. Vernon was already talking to Della about Lisette's showroom lease, as if I had already left the room before I had actually left it. Stuart caught me in the driveway. He walked me to my car, which was a 12-year-old Honda with one working speaker and a passenger side mirror held on with tape. "Your father is wrong," he said. "I know," I said. "What are you going to do?" "Buy the truck anyway." He nodded. He did not offer money, and I would not have taken it if he had. The nod was enough. It was the only thing anyone in that family gave me that day, and it was the only thing I needed. What my parents gave Lisette instead, over the next 4 years, came to $840,000 total. That number is not a guess. I saw the records later, and I will tell you exactly how I saw them, and why the total is correct. A designer office with imported Italian tile and a reception area that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. Suppliers in Milan and Barcelona who required minimum orders Lisette could never fill. 2 expansion attempts, both failures, both funded by Vernon writing checks from accounts I did not yet know existed, and Della transferring money without telling anyone who should have been told. 0 profit in 5 full years, not a single quarter in the black. The showroom looked beautiful. It looked like someone's idea of what success was supposed to look like if you did not know what success actually cost. I bought the first truck the Tuesday after that dinner. 212,000 miles, Route 9, Pete the salesman, the Atlas, the yellow marker. I got my CDL 3 months later by studying for the written exam on my lunch breaks at the distribution center and practicing in a rented rig on weekends. I drove the first route myself, 340 miles to the paper mill in Colton and back, and when I pulled into the lot at 2 a.m. and turned off the engine, I sat in the cab for 10 minutes with the Atlas on the passenger seat and did not call anyone. There was nobody to call. The people who should have been proud were investing in Italian tile. What happened next took 6 years, and I will compress it because the story is not about the growth. The story is about what they did while I was growing. Year 2, I hired Janelle. She answered a Craigslist ad I posted at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. And she showed up the next morning in a flannel shirt and steel-toed boots and said, "I can drive anything you have." She could. She drove the second truck while I drove the first, and for 8 months it was just the 2 of us and 2 trucks and a dispatch board made of index cards tacked to a corkboard in my apartment kitchen. We ate lunch on the tailgate of whichever truck was parked closer to the warehouse district, and she never asked if the checks would clear. She just drove. Year 3, I found a warehouse at a foreclosure auction and bought it for $280,000, financed through a commercial lender who looked at my 2 years of tax returns and said I qualified. I moved the operation out of my apartment and into a concrete building with loading docks and a glass-walled office in the corner that I furnished with a folding table and a phone charger. By the end of year 3, I had 4 trucks and 6 employees and a real dispatch system that was no longer index cards on a corkboard. Year 4, 6 trucks. Year 5, 8. Year 6, which is now 12 trucks, 18 employees, $1.2 million in annual revenue. RV Freight LLC. The warehouse is paid off. Current value, $420,000. I drove Ruth to her knee specialist 3 times last year because Vernon would not take a day off from golf, and I bought a $340 lamp from Lisette's showroom at the opening because she looked terrified and nobody else was buying anything. I kept showing up because Mom cried every time I missed a holiday, and that was enough to keep me tethered to a family that had decided what I was worth at a dining room table 6 years earlier. It should not have been enough. But it was. 6 months ago, quietly and without announcement, my attorney moved the warehouse deed into the LLC. I had been hearing from Della's side comments that Lisette's showroom was in trouble. I did not know what form the trouble would take or what my parents would try to do about it, but I had spent 6 years building something without their help, and I wanted to make sure they could not take it without my consent. The LC filing was a precaution. It turned out to be the most important document in this story. If this story sounds like yours, if you have ever been told your plan was not worth believing in by the people who were supposed to believe in you first, stay with Karma Unfolded. We tell the full story every week. Lisette's showroom closed 2 months before everything else happened. The closing was quiet. No announcement, no final sale. The landlord changed the locks, and the website went dark, and that was the end of 5 years and every dollar my parents had poured into it. Lisette called me once, about a week after the doors closed. She said 7 words, "I'm sorry I took everything they had." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing, and after a few seconds, she hung up. That was the last time we spoke before the confrontation. The landlord, however, was not finished with the Lisette situation. Lisette's commercial lease had 14 months remaining at $8,400 per month, which meant $117,600 in rent still owed on a closed showroom. Vernon had personally guaranteed that lease 4 years ago when Lisette signed it. The guarantee was his signature, his credit, his liability. The landlord sent Vernon a formal notice: "You signed the guarantee, the tenant has defaulted, you owe the balance." Vernon did not have that kind of money. After 5 years of funding the showroom, his retirement account held $180. Zero and Della's rental units brought in enough for living expenses, but nothing more. They needed a large sum fast, and the only asset in the family that could produce it was a warehouse on the industrial corridor that their other daughter had bought with money they never gave her. That is where Della made the mistake. She was texting Lisette, coaching her on what to say when the time came to ask me for the warehouse. They had been planning this conversation for days, running through scripts, deciding on the best angle. Della typed, "Tell her you'll pay her back from the showroom profits." That's the line. Don't mention the family account. She forwarded it to the wrong sister. The contact list alphabetized our names 1 position apart, and Della, who had spent 30 years handling other people's money at a bank counter without a single processing error, tapped the wrong name. 1 contact. 1 mistake. 30 years of precision undone by autocomplete. I read it at 3:47 p.m. in my truck on the shoulder of Route 9, coming back from a delivery confirmation at the paper mill. I was sitting in the cab with the window cracked, the engine idling, looking at a text message that was never meant for me. 2 words at the end that I had never heard before. Family account. I read it 3 times. Each time, the same 2 words sat heavier. Family account. Nobody had ever mentioned a family account to me. Not Vernon, not Della, not Lisette. In 33 years of being part of this family, through holidays and graduations and funerals, and the dinner where I was told my dream was worthless, nobody had mentioned the existence of a family account. I pulled the atlas out of the glove box, opened it to the first page, the one with the yellow highlighted route from the warehouse to Colton. Ran my finger along the line I had driven hundreds of times in 6 years. The paper was soft from use, and the yellow marker was starting to fade at the edges, but the route was still visible. I sat with the atlas open on the passenger seat for 4 minutes, the road empty ahead of me. I almost called Della right there. My thumb was on her name, and the forwarded text was still glowing on the screen. But the atlas was beside me, and the yellow marker was still bright on the route I had driven without a cent of their money, and I thought about every mile I had logged on that road, and every invoice I had paid, and every driver I had hired with cash flow I built from nothing. I put the phone down and called my attorney instead. "There is a family account I was never told about," I said. My grandmother opened it. "I believe my name is on it. I need you to find out what happened to the money." My attorney asked me to forward the text screenshot. I did. She said she would file a formal records request with the financial institution as a named account holder's representative, which was standard procedure, and that it would take 5 to 10 business days. I said I would wait. 7 days later, my attorney called. The records had arrived from the financial institution. She read me the summary over the phone, and I sat in my glass-walled office at the warehouse, looking through the window at Janelle checking manifests at the dispatch desk, and I listened. The account was a joint investment account opened by my grandmother 15 years earlier. Both granddaughters named as beneficiaries, Lisette and Ramona. Vernon listed as trustee with withdrawal authority. Original funded balance, $200,000. My grandmother had put the money in for both of us. Equal shares. Equal intentions. The withdrawal started 6 years ago. $80,000 in March of the first year. $70,000 the following August. $50,000 the January after that. All three coded as business investment. All three routed to accounts associated with Lisette's showroom. Current balance, $0. Every dollar gone. 3 withdrawals over 3 years, and the account that my grandmother had opened for both of her granddaughters was empty. My attorney was still talking, but I had stopped hearing her after the first withdrawal date. March, 6 years ago. The same month I sat at my parents' dining table and asked for help, and my father said he could not afford it. The same month he called my plan a broke man's fantasy. That same month, he made the first withdrawal from the account and gave it to Lisette's showroom. He told me he lacked the money. The account had a full balance. He pulled from it the very month he turned me away. My signature appeared on nothing. I was never notified of any withdrawal. Vernon used his trustee authority, and Della, who had spent 30 years as a bank teller and understood exactly how account notifications worked, made sure I never received one. I sat in my office for 15 minutes after the call ended. The atlas was in the glove box of my truck in the lot outside. Through the glass, I could see Janelle at her dispatch desk, headset on, coordinating a Thursday pickup with a distribution center near the coast. She had been my first hire. When the company was 2 trucks and a corkboard in my kitchen, she drove the second one and never once asked me whether the checks were going to clear. She just showed up, put on her boots, and drove. I walked out to the dispatch desk. The warehouse floor was concrete under my boots. The fluorescent lights hummed the way they always did in the late afternoon. "I need to tell you something," I said. Janelle took off her headset and set it on the desk. I told her everything. The family account. The withdrawals. The first one taken the same month I was denied the loan. The text Della sent to the wrong number. Janelle listened without interrupting, her hands flat on the desk, the way she listens to everything, which is completely and without performance. She did not look away, and she did not react until I was finished. When I stopped talking, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You built this with nothing, and they stole from you while you were doing it. The trucks are still here. So am I. What do you need me to do?" 5 words in the middle of that mattered more than anything my parents had said in 6 years. The trucks are still here. Janelle did not hug me. She did not tell me she was sorry. She asked me what I needed, the way she had been asking me since the day she answered a Craigslist ad and showed up in flannel and steel-toed boots. That was her moment, and it was enough. My attorney drafted 2 documents. The first was a demand letter for the full account balance plus statutory interest, addressed to Vernon as trustee, citing breach of fiduciary duty and unauthorized withdrawal from a joint account. The second was a cease and desist directing Vernon and Della to stop all contact regarding the sale of the warehouse and warning that further demands would be treated as harassment. Both documents were finalized and ready for delivery within 5 days. I almost drove to their house that night. Had my truck running in the warehouse lot, the atlas on the passenger seat. The address I had not visited in 2 years sitting in my memory like a route I could still drive blind. But Janelle had texted me at 9 p.m., Thursday load confirmed. Route 9, your favorite. And I sat in the lot and realized that the company did not stop running because my father stole from me. It kept going. The loads kept coming. The trucks kept rolling. So I kept going with them. I need to tell you something about Lisette because the story changes here. 2 months earlier, when she called and said, "I'm sorry I took everything they had," I heard it as a guilt admission. A woman who had received every dollar my parents could find and burned through it. But after the account records arrived, I heard the sentence differently. She did not say, "I'm sorry I built this." She said, "I took everything they had." Not ownership. Obligation. She was not apologizing for her business. She was apologizing for taking something she never wanted. I remembered the dinner 6 years ago. Lisette at the table with her hands folded and her eyes on the tablecloth. She did not speak when Vernon gave his broke man's fantasy speech. She did not smile when Della talked about the showroom making the family proud. She sat with her fingers pressing into the tablecloth, and I had noticed it even then, even through my own anger, that she looked like someone bracing for an assignment, not someone celebrating an opportunity. I called Janelle's sister, who had worked briefly at the showroom 2 years earlier as a sales associate. She picked up on the second ring and confirmed what I had suspected since that dinner. Lisette hated it, she said. She wanted to teach interior design at the community college. She had the portfolio for it. Your dad picked the suppliers. He picked the showroom location. He chose both expansion plans and told Lisette when to sign. When the first expansion failed, she went to your parents' house and told him she wanted to close the business and apply for a teaching position. He said no. He said the family had invested too much. He said she would embarrass him. The twist was this. Vernon did not fund the daughter he believed in. He funded the daughter he could control. Lisette would sign what Vernon put in front of her. She would accept the suppliers he chose and the expansion plans he designed, and the commercial lease he personally guaranteed. She was manageable. I was not. I had shown up at his dining table with a spiral notebook and asked for money to buy trucks, and when he said no, I went and bought the trucks anyway. That was the problem. Not trucking, not the CDL, not the work boots or the grease on my hands. The problem was that I did not need his permission, and I proved it the Tuesday after the dinner when I signed the title on a truck with 212,000 miles and never looked back at his table. The money was never an investment in Lisette. It was a monument to Vernon's taste, built with his daughter's name on the door and his other daughter's inheritance inside the walls. In the days before the confrontation, Della called me twice. 3 days before. 2 days before. I let both calls go to voicemail and did not listen to either message. Then silence. When parents stop calling after 2 attempts. It means they have switched from asking to arriving. I knew the pattern from 20 years of watching Vernon operate. He would ask, then insist, then show up. The silence after the second call meant the show up was coming. I told Janelle on Monday afternoon they are coming to the warehouse. She looked at me over her dispatch desk. When? Soon I put the atlas in my jacket pocket. It fit against my ribs the way it always did, the spiral binding pressing through the fabric. I could feel the weight of it, which was not much, but it was enough. If you have been with this story since the first truck, stay with Karma Unfolded. Every week, the full story. Tuesday afternoon. I was standing on the loading dock reviewing a fuel invoice with one of my drivers when I saw Vernon's car pull into the warehouse lot. Silver sedan, the same one he had driven for 8 years, the same one he drove to the golf course 3 times a week while I drove his wife to her knee specialist. Della was in the passenger seat. She was holding a folder in her lap. They parked near the bay door and sat in the car for a moment before getting out. I watched them through the dock opening. Vernon adjusted his collar. Della said something to him, and he nodded. They were preparing. Whatever they had rehearsed, they were running through it one final time. Then they got out and walked into the warehouse through the bay door like people entering a building they believed they had some claim to. The warehouse was never a place Vernon had visited. He had never seen the loading docks, the fleet, the dispatch desk. He had never walked across the concrete floor where 18 people earned paychecks. Never looked up at the ceiling that I had patched twice myself in the first year because I could not afford a contractor. He was seeing all of it for the first time, and I watched his eyes move across the trucks and the loading bays and the office with its glass walls and the RV Freight LLC logo on the door, and I watched him calculate what it was all worth and file it under the category of things his rejected daughter had built without him. I stepped down from the dock and met them on the warehouse floor. Concrete under my boots, 2 trucks parked behind me, the glass-walled office to my left where Janelle was sitting at her desk. No invitation to the office, no chairs offered. "We need to talk about the warehouse," Vernon said. He had rehearsed this. His voice was measured, his posture open, his hands held at his sides in the practiced way of a man who has decided not to look aggressive. "Lisette's showroom is closed. There is a lease balance. Your warehouse is worth $420,000. If you sell it, we can cover the lease, settle the accounts, and move forward. As a family." "No," I said. Vernon blinked. He had expected resistance, but not a single word answer with no qualifiers. He pushed forward anyway. "Ramona, this is not about what happened 6 years ago. This is about the present. Your sister is in trouble. Your mother and I are in trouble. We are asking you for help." Della opened the folder. Inside were printed pages with Lisette's lease numbers, the guarantee language highlighted, the remaining balance calculation circled in pen. She held it toward me as if the numbers themselves were an argument, as if showing me the size of the hole would make me want to fill it. I did not take the folder. I took out my phone. I opened the screenshot of Della's forwarded text, the one she sent me by mistake 2 weeks earlier. I turned the screen toward both of them. "Tell her you'll pay her back from the showroom profits." That's the line. Don't mention the family account. Della's hand, the one holding the folder, dropped to her side. The folder stayed in her grip, but her arm had lost whatever was holding it up. Vernon looked at the phone and then at Della. He did not speak for 3 seconds. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket and pulled out the LLC filing. The warehouse deed, transferred 6 months earlier into RV Freight LLC. My name was on the company. The company's name was on the deed. Vernon's name appeared nowhere. "Even if I wanted to sell this warehouse," I said, "and I do not, it is not in my personal name. It belongs to the LLC. Your name is not on it. You have no claim to it. You have no authority over it. The only document with your name on it is Lisette's lease guarantee, and that is your problem." Then I set the demand letter on the hood of the truck nearest to Vernon, the letter from my attorney. Full restitution of the account balance plus statutory interest. Return of funds withdrawn without the consent of a named holder. Cease and desist regarding any further contact about the warehouse or any other asset of RV Freight LLC. Vernon picked up the letter with his right hand. His left hand found the edge of a folding chair leaning against the wall and gripped it, his knuckles pressing white against the metal frame. His jaw locked mid-word. He read the letter, and his weight shifted backward, and the chair scraped against the concrete floor. He looked up at me, and his mouth opened, closed, opened again. Della pressed both hands flat on her purse and looked at Vernon twice, waiting for him to say something, waiting for him to fix this. He did not fix it. "You called it a broke man's fantasy," I said. "That was 6 years ago. Same month you withdrew $80,000 from an account with my name on it and handed it to Lisette. You said you could not afford to help me. You had $200,000 in an account my grandmother opened for both of us, and you drained every dollar of it across 3 years. I was never notified of a single withdrawal. My signature is on nothing." Vernon's hand, still on the chair, was shaking. "You gave Lisette everything, a designer office, suppliers she could not afford, expansions she did not ask for. She never wanted the showroom, Dad. You wanted it. Because furniture was respectable and trucking was not. You built her a business she never asked for with money that was partly mine, and when it failed, you drove to the business I'd built without you and asked me to sell it. I turned to Della. You sent me that text by mistake. Don't mention the family account. You knew about the account. You knew about the withdrawals. You spent 30 years as a bank teller, Mom. You know exactly how account notifications work. You made sure I never received one. Della's breath caught once, audible on the warehouse floor. You told me a truck does not make anyone proud. These trucks, I said, and the gesture was unnecessary because the trucks were standing between us and Vernon could read the company name on every door, pay 18 salaries. They move freight on 6 routes. They paid off this warehouse in 4 years. These trucks are the only business in this family that is not bankrupt. Vernon made a sound, half a word. Ramona, I never meant to. My attorney filed the demand for the full account restitution plus interest. That is the only financial conversation between us now. I took a breath. Get out of my warehouse. Do not come back. Do not send Lisette. Do not send Mom with a folder. Do not call me about the showroom, the lease, or anything with Lisette's name attached to it. I am done being the daughter who shows up. You chose which daughter to fund. Live with it. Vernon was still holding the demand letter. His jaw worked sideways once, the way it does when someone is trying to form words and the body will not cooperate. His left hand came up to rub his face and stayed there, covering his eyes for a moment, like a man trying to block out a room he could not leave fast enough. Della grabbed his arm. She pulled. He did not resist. I said 2 words. Flat, no heat, get out. Janelle was watching through the glass of the office. A driver named Cole had walked in from the loading dock 20 seconds earlier and was standing near the bay door, keys in hand, having heard the last exchange clearly. 2 witnesses. Vernon and Della walked past both of them and out through the bay door and into the parking lot. The warehouse went quiet after they left. The fluorescent lights hummed above the trucks. I stood on the concrete floor and felt the atlas in my jacket pocket, the spiral binding pressing against my ribs. The air smelled like diesel and concrete dust and the faint metallic tang of the loading dock chain that was still swinging from the last delivery. Janelle came out of the office and stood at the glass door without speaking. She looked at me for a few seconds, then nodded once and went back to her desk. That was all she needed to do. The nod was the same one Stuart had given me in the driveway 6 years ago. It meant the same thing. You are right, and I am here, and nobody needs to say anything else about it. I stood on the warehouse floor for another minute, between the trucks, looking at the bay door where Vernon and Della had walked out. Then I went back to work. There were manifests to review, and a Thursday delivery to schedule, and a fuel invoice to sign, and the company did not pause because my parents had just walked out of a building they should never have walked into. 3 days later, Stuart pulled into the lot. Vernon's brother. He walked into the warehouse the way he walks into everything, which is straight and without ceremony, and said, "Your father asked me to come talk some sense into you." I pulled out my phone and showed him the forwarded text. Then I handed him the account records my attorney had compiled, the 3 withdrawals, the dates, the amounts, the 0 balance. Stuart sat down on a shipping crate near the dispatch desk and read every page. He took his time, 6 minutes, maybe 7. Janelle watched from her desk, but said nothing. When he looked up, his face had changed. The expression he had walked in with, the reasonable uncle expression, the let's work this out expression, was gone. In its place was something quieter and less comfortable. "Your father didn't tell me about the account," he said. "I know," I said. Stuart put the papers on the crate. He stood up and straightened his jacket. "Tell him the warehouse is in an LLC," I said. "His name isn't on it. The only thing with his name on it is Lisette's lease guarantee. That's his problem, not mine." Stuart nodded. He walked to the parking lot without saying anything else. I watched through the bay door as he took out his phone and called Vernon. I could not hear all of it from where I stood, but I heard the sentence that mattered. "Leave her alone, Vern, you're wrong." He drove away. He did not come back. and that was the last person Vernon sent to my warehouse. 2 weeks after the confrontation, the landlord filed a civil suit against Vernon for the lease guarantee. $117,600, the full remaining balance on Lisette's commercial lease. Vernon received the summons at his mailbox in the 55-plus community where he and Della lived. He stood in the driveway in his golf shirt, reading the document with the posture of a man who has just discovered that the ground he was standing on is not as solid as the concrete in his daughter's warehouse. He carried it inside and set it on the kitchen counter next to the demand letter from my attorney for the full account balance. 2 legal documents side by side on the same counter where he and Della ate breakfast every morning. Combined liability, $317,600. His retirement account held $180,000. He opened a calculator app on his phone, typed the numbers, closed the app, opened it. The numbers did not change. They were not going to change. 3 weeks after the confrontation, on a Saturday night, Vernon and Della went to their usual dinner at the community clubhouse. They sat at the table by the window, the one they had occupied for 4 years, and ordered what they always ordered. A neighbor named Marge, who knew me because my trucks delivered to the warehouse district near her son's plastics plant every Thursday, leaned across the table divider. "Is it true what I heard about Ramona?" she asked. Vernon set his fork down but did not respond. Marge continued, and she was not asking because she was uncertain. She was asking because she wanted Vernon to hear himself, not answer. "That girl built a trucking company from nothing. She delivers to my son's plant every week. He says she is the most reliable hauler on the corridor, and you want her to sell her warehouse? To cover your daughter's furniture store?" She looked at Vernon for 4 seconds, then looked at Della for 2 more, then turned back to her plate without waiting for an answer. 2 couples at the adjacent table had heard every word. They finished their meals without speaking to Vernon or Della. They left without saying goodbye. Nobody was cruel about it. Nobody needed to be. The empty chairs at the end of the night said everything the words did not. 10 days after the confrontation, Lisette sat on her couch in the apartment she had moved into after the showroom closed. The showroom keys were on her kitchen counter, returned to the landlord the previous week. Her phone was in her hands. She opened a text thread with my name and started typing. I didn't ask them to. She looked at the words. They were not right. She deleted them. She typed again, "You were right about." That was worse. She deleted it. She typed a 3rd time, "I'm sorry about the account." She stared at the screen for 40 seconds. The cursor blinked at the end of the sentence. She imagined me reading it, and then she imagined me not reading it. And then she imagined me reading it and saying nothing back, which was worse than either. She deleted the entire thread, set the phone face down on the couch cushion, pulled a blanket over her knees. The apartment was quiet and the showroom keys were on the counter and the cursor had stopped blinking because there was nothing left on the screen to blink after. Della called me once, 2 weeks after the confrontation. I watched the notification come in and let it go to voicemail. She did not leave a message. The missed call sat in my phone the way certain things sit when you have already heard everything the person on the other end could possibly say, and the silence after the ring is the most honest thing left between you. 8 weeks after the warehouse, I drove Route 9 in the newest truck in the fleet. The 12th. My name was on the driver's door in small white letters, Ramona Vega, RV Freight LLC. I was coming back from the paper mill in Colton, same destination as my first route 6 years earlier, same highway, same exit, same stretch of road where I had once pulled over to read a text that was never meant for me and sat with an atlas on the passenger seat while the engine idled and the world rearranged itself around 2 words I had never heard before. Vernon's kitchen counter had 2 legal documents on it and a calculator app that kept producing the same answer no matter how many times he opened it. His retirement account was not going to cover the combined liability, and the conversations he and Della were having about it were the kind that go in circles, because the math does not move no matter how many times you walk around it. Lisette's apartment had showroom keys on the counter, and a text thread that no longer existed because she had deleted every version of the apology she could not finish. Della had not called me again. The missed call from 2 weeks after the confrontation was still in my phone, unanswered, and it was going to stay that way. I pulled into the paper mill lot and parked in the same row where I had parked the first truck 6 years ago. Row 3, far end, near the concrete barrier. The spot was not reserved, and nobody at the mill remembered which slot I had used on that first overnight run when I was 27 and the truck had 212,000 miles and the Atlas was brand new. I remembered. I turned off the engine and sat in the cab. The lot was quiet except for a forklift inside the loading bay and the low hum of the mill machinery behind the wall. 6 years ago, I had sat in this exact row in a truck my father refused to fund, with a spiral notebook on the seat beside me and a deal I had earned 3 months after the dinner, where Vernon told me I had a broke man's fantasy. That truck was gone now, retired at 330,000 miles, sold to a contractor in the valley who was still running it last I heard. The company that first truck built was not gone. 12 vehicles. 18 employees. A warehouse paid off and held in an LLC that bore my initials and nobody else's name. I opened the glove box and pulled out the Atlas. Same Rand McNally. Same coffee stain on the cover from the gas station counter where I bought it the week I signed the title on truck number 1. Same spiral binding, slightly looser now from 6 years of being opened and closed and transferred from glove box to glove box across 4 different cabs. I opened it to the first page. The yellow marker was still there, fading at the edges but visible. The line I had drawn with a cheap highlighter at a gas station table. 340 miles, a paper mill in Colton, a route I had driven hundreds of times since in trucks that got newer and stronger on a road that never changed. The Atlas did not know about the family account. It did not know about Vernon's lease guarantee or Della's forwarded text or Lisette's unfinished apology. The Atlas only knew the route: start here, drive there, come back. It had been doing that for 6 years without asking anyone's permission. So had I. My phone buzzed. Janelle, Thursday load confirmed. Route 9. Your favorite. I almost said more to my parents that afternoon on the warehouse floor. I had 6 years of words stored behind my teeth, sharpened by every mile I drove without their money, and every invoice I paid without their help, and every employee I hired while they were pouring their savings into a showroom that Lisette never wanted. But the Atlas was in my jacket, and the trucks were behind me, and the concrete was under my boots, paid for, owned, mine. I did not need 6 years of sentences. I needed 2 words. Get out. I closed the Atlas, put it back in the glove box, started the engine. It sounded different from the first truck, quieter, cleaner, stronger, the way a 12th truck should sound after the first 11 proved the road was real. But Route 9 sounded the same under the wheels. Same pavement, same slight grade at mile marker 42, same curve before the mill exit. I pulled out of the lot and turned south. The Atlas was in the glove box. The road was ahead of me. The warehouse was behind me, locked and lit and running. 18 people inside who had jobs because a 27-year-old woman bought a truck her parents refused to fund and drove it until it paid for the next one and the next one and the next one after that. If this story stayed with you from the first mile, subscribe to Karma Unfolded and hit the notification bell. We are here every week with the full story, from the first route to the last word.